I guess you have all heard, considering Alex Jones is like the #2 worldwide trend right now, that InfoWars has basically been purged from the internet. Apple took him down, Spotify took him down, Facebook took him down, YouTube took him down. I think like the only big thing they have left is Twitter. Now, this video is not going to be about InfoWars, but I bring this up because you can see here what's on the screen. Upworthy, editor-in-chief resigns after company lays off 31 employees. Today we're going to talk about the collapse of media. And the reason I bring up InfoWars is I feel like they are a direct threat for a lot of reasons. Talking from the perspective of these big media companies, I think you have these journalists in New York. A lot of them are activists. There is a difference between the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and websites like Upworthy. Upworthy is literally, I believe they originated clickbait. One of the first big sites to use clickbait. They would take existing YouTube videos, take a clickbait headline, and basically it was genius. The videos already existed. They didn't have to do any work, but they were titled poorly. So basically they'd see this video, give it a good title, it would go viral. They'd make money. They're activists, right? So, Upworthy wants to promote activism, things like that. The New York Times is a bit different. I have lost a substantial amount of respect for them after they backed that open racist, Sarah Jeong. And I always got to preface this, it is not just my opinion that she's racist. New York Daily News, BBC, for a while, The Independent, many mainstream sites, even left-wing sites called her racist because of the things she was saying about white people. But anyway, the point of this video, we're going to talk about Upworthy's layoffs, we're going to talk about the mainstream media collapsing, and I wanted to mention that I think they look at something like InfoWars, where Alex Jones, it's wild speculation. His videos are just opinion, to say the least. Most of what Alex Jones personally does is opinion. I don't like him. Not professionally, I don't like him. I don't know him personally. He might be a nice guy. Joe Rogan apparently loves the dude. But Alex Jones puts out a bunch of wacky stuff. So I'll just go off what Joe Rogan said. He said, Alex Jones, you got to chill out on this stuff. And it's my understanding that InfoWars, like they have on-the-ground reporters and stuff. I don't use them as a source in any of my work as much as I don't use a lot of digital activists. Like I would never use Upworthy. I would never use InfoWars. Take it for what it is. But I do think the mainstream media has, these like mainstream journalists have gone after InfoWars so much because they view themselves as the bastions of truth. And they're threatened by InfoWars for a few reasons. He had, I think, 2.4 million subs on his YouTube channel. But when you look at how big InfoWars is, and how, NBC tried launching a digital YouTube channel and didn't work. Or I shouldn't say it didn't work, but it's slow going. Look at Fusion, right? So I worked at Fusion. It's now called Splinter News. The TV station is still Fusion. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Univision and ABC joint venture, and they couldn't come close to what Alex Jones was pulling off. So, look, I think from a business point of view, you've got business people who are pissed off that Jones is pulling the stuff off. You've got journalists talking about, they're literally saying about how they're the real journalists and Alex Jones is the fake news, and they don't like it. So then they come out and say, you got to take down the fake news. You got to go after the fake news. And that's what happens. Again, I don't think InfoWars is a great source of information. And I think you have to be really, really careful about that stuff. He had to apologize about the Pizzagate stuff, to say the least, right? But anyway, let's talk about the dying media and move away from the breaking Alex Jonesy stuff. But here we have this story from CNN. Let me just say, CNN commentary, I think it's god-awful. But CNN's reporting is pretty run-of-the-mill. It's, when it comes to a news organization, I actually think CNN's just like general reporting on basic things like this. Yet we know Upworthy editor-in-chief resigned. They tweeted about it. So I think it's typically, it's okay. But when it comes to like what's actually on the TV, let me just say Don Lemon once suggested a black hole may have swallowed an airplane. So I don't, but we'll use them for what it is. So viral news website Upworthy has laid off a significant chunk of its staff. More than 30 people were let go from the whole company. A spokesperson for Good Media Group confirmed to CNN. The company cited an increasingly challenging media environment. Today we had to make the hard decision to say goodbye to esteemed colleagues, the company said in a statement. An incredible team remains and our mission is as relevant now as ever. Editor-in-chief Liz Heron wrote on Twitter that her entire team was laid off. Well, I'll just pull up her tweet. She said, this was from the 2nd. Today, almost my entire team at Upworthy/Good was laid off and I resigned. This talented and passionate group of reporters, editors, growth, data, and product experts is now looking for work, so if you're hiring and want introductions, DM me. Let's talk about the mainstream media. And let's talk about Liz Heron. I've met Liz Heron. I believe she's the person I met at Facebook Yes. So Facebook was doing like a news initiative. They had me come in. I talked to them about live. She's very nice. However, this is very disconcerting. When you look at Upworthy is an activist organization, hands down. It's called Upworthy/Good. They are specifically organized around. I mean, it's. I think one of the guys is from MoveOn.org. It is left wing. It is democratic activism. It is propaganda. I don't use the word propaganda lightly, and I don't use it hyperbolically. Propaganda is defined as information with the intent to push a partisan view, right? So that's what Upworthy is. What she is saying is that there's a bunch of reporters. I'm not going to call a propagandist a reporter, okay? There are a lot of people who work for CNN, who work for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, who are reporters. Absolutely, they have opinions, but they'll do an honest job of. So I'll give you an example of some journalists I have respect for, like Rosie Gray, who I believe is at The Atlantic, and out of all the journalists I've met, I think she's one of the most respectable because she's very straight to the point, very blunt, like is it or isn't it? I have a lot of respect for the work she does, and I think she's done a good job with her pieces. There's a guy who writes for The New Yorker. He actually wrote about me. Actually, it's where is it? Right there. That paper. It's by Andrew Marantz, and it is not a positive piece, but it's not a negative piece. It's just like a neutral view of me that he wrote in The New Yorker. I disagree with a lot of what he said, but of course I would. I'm the subject of the story, but I think he does a good job too, and he actually embeds with people, and he's willing to have a good conversation, and I think he's fair. So again, he wrote a story about me, and I'm like, okay, I don't agree with how he framed it, but he's not incorrect to frame it the way he is, and I have a lot of respect for that he will stand his ground and write something that's fair. But there are a lot of people who are propagandists. I was at VidCon, and on the stage, the president of Now This News, which I believe was funded by NBC, I could be wrong, said that they were working with anti-Trump activists on their coverage. And I'm like, okay, you just literally said you're a propaganda organization, okay? You absolutely can be a news organization that is critical of Trump. Your editorial view can be anti-Trump. No problem with that, and that can still be journalism. But when you say activists are working with you to produce content, well, you stop right there. You've just flat out admitted you're propaganda. Okay, that's not okay. One of the biggest problems we're facing is that instead of getting facts, we're getting propaganda. And CNN, I think, is one of the best at cranking out the nonstop Trump-Russia narrative because, I don't know, the Trump bump, they're trying to get ratings. When you look at the actual spread of coverage about the Trump-Russia stuff, it seems more like Russia is trying to disrupt our society, our culture, and our government. Not that they're necessarily, it's not so much that they want Trump to be their guy, but that they'll help Trump because it screws with Hillary and it's disruptive. That being said, too, I think the Russia stuff is extremely overhyped. I think they've been manipulating our elections forever. We had spies here throughout the Cold War. It's not new. I do think we should be concerned about it. We should pay attention. But I think CNN's really good at cranking that stuff up. So let's move on to the next little tidbit, because I'm not going to rant on this for too much longer. But here we have a story from Pew Research. About a third of large U.S. newspapers have suffered layoffs since 2017. This is not Upworthy. This is not these digital sites that are far left or anything. This is actual U.S. newspapers. And in it, they can show you that 36% are seeing layoffs. 23% of digital native news outlets are seeing layoffs. I would imagine, and I could be wrong, that even among the companies that aren't seeing layoffs, they're probably struggling. They're not growing. And part of the reason I think is that the internet has diversified the opportunity, the access to the public space. If you wanted to reach a mass audience 20, 30 years ago, you had to go on TV. You had to get lucky. You had to hope they would give you that slot. And you do these interviews when, because I've been on Fox, I've been on MSNBC, I've been on Bloomberg, and you get a few minutes to try and squeeze in as much information as possible, and it just doesn't work. Well, now when I do an interview with someone, it's like hour long, and it's raw, no editing. We talk, we say what we said, and that's it. There's no reason to cut it down. And that gives people a much better opportunity. And now we're hearing more voices. The more voices we hear, the more subgroups can form. So, back in the day, when they only had time for a handful of people, they would choose the most mainstream voices to try and appeal to the largest audience. Now you've got websites like Vox that have no problem being far left because they're like, well, why bother trying to get the middle when we can get a big group of people on the far left? That's what they do. So that restricts the audience size and makes it hard to grow. And at some point, even a company like Upworthy, that is one of the progenitors of clickbait, is going to lay people off. So I'll just read a couple little tidbits from here. They say at least 36% of the largest newspapers across the United States, as well as at least 23% of the highest traffic digital native news outlets, experienced layoffs between January 2017 and April 2018, according to a study among newspapers. Those with the highest circulation were most likely to be affected. And that's really interesting. You'd imagine the more circulation they had, that they'd actually do well. Larger newspapers, those with circulations of at least 250,000, were more likely than smaller circulation papers to have experienced layoffs between January 2017 and April 2018. 9 of the 16 newspapers with circulations of 250K or more had layoffs. By comparison, that was true of 16 of the 44 newspapers with circulations between 100 and 250. And 15 of the 50, I don't want to get too much in the numbers. So I don't think it goes into much more detail than that. Suffice it to say, when we see things like these stories coming out about InfoWars and condemning fake news and really coming after it, I have to wonder what the motivation is. I really do believe that, there was a time where journalists were really well off, and now not so much. There are a lot of journalists who have moved into the PR space. They're working in marketing now because they understand publishing and public perception. But instead of producing information for the public, they're manipulating the public. And then a lot of these companies have embraced activism to try and capture that audience. Suffice it to say, we know these companies are doing bad. The CEO of Vice said, I think this was in 2014 or 2015, there was going to be a bloodbath in digital. And it looks like, I guess you can call 23% of digital outlets laying people off a bloodbath, 36% of newspapers. I'm not super confident these companies are going to be able to survive. And I'll tell you this, as those boats are sinking, as they're drowning, they're going to thrash about something fierce. They're not going to go down lightly, and they're going to drag down anyone they think is in their way. So you know what's going to happen? You're going to see more of these companies threatened by people like me, by people like InfoWars. And I don't want to compare myself to InfoWars other than the fact that we're alternative media on an alternative platform. But I'm going to be arrogant here and say I hold myself to a much higher standard than I view InfoWars. You can be a fan of InfoWars, don't get me wrong. I just try to, we're in a different space. I try to make sure I have hardcore facts, for everything I do in my opinions. And I know a lot of people like InfoWars because we're on YouTube and YouTube is an alternative space. So by all means, I would recommend diversifying your viewing habits if you are a fan of InfoWars. But I will also add, even if you are and you watch them, then the only thing I can say is I appreciate you guys actually giving my channel a chance and listening to what I have to say. Because if you think they're right and you're willing to listen to me too, then you're open-minded to counter arguments, even from someone who's going to tell you they don't like InfoWars, and that's important. Because personally, I think InfoWars is a lot of baloney, but it's not about what I think is right. It's about the willingness to hear more voices and hear counter narratives to what you actually think is right. As much as my personal opinion would be, I'd rather people actually paid attention to independent journalists and mainstream media, because you want your independent journalists to counter the mainstream media. I am appreciative of those who are willing to listen to anything, as long as you're listening to a diverse set. So anyway, long story short, I don't know where we're going. It looks like the boat's sinking. And that's one of the reasons I left mainstream media. And I decided not to go to these companies and to do this, because I got to do something else. I don't know what's going to work. I don't know why or how it'll work. What I'm doing is working. And with you guys watching this, just by watching the video, it supports my work, and I really appreciate that. Whether or not what I do can become something as big as like a mainstream outlet, I have no idea. But I would say right now we're on a path towards something better, and hopefully, viewer supported, Patreon supported, channel membership supported. Maybe that can work. I know Alex Jones was selling supplements. I sell T-shirts sometimes. Most of the income I get is actually Patreon. That really is what keeps the boat afloat. So maybe that's it. Maybe it'll just come down to, you guys all trust me, so you'll watch my videos, and those of you who want will become patrons. I'll get some ad revenue on YouTube when they don't demonetize me, and maybe you'll buy some shirts. But anyway, thanks for hanging out and watching this video. Stay tuned. I believe I might have 1 or 2 more videos up on this channel in just a minute.